Director Milt Heflin. I'll have brief remarks from both gentlemen, and then we'll throw it open for questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron.
I'm sure you understand how difficult a time this is for us right now. We're devastated because of the events that unfolded this morning. There's a certain amount of shock in our system because we have suffered the loss of 7 family members. And we're learning to deal with that. There's certainly a somber mood in our teams as we continue to try to understand the events that occurred. But our thoughts and our prayers go out to the families of Rick and Willie, David and Kalpana, Michael, Laurel, and Alon. True heroes, and we are suffering for the events that have happened this morning. As difficult as this is for us to do, we wanted to meet with you and be as fair and open with you given the facts as we understand them today. We will certainly be learning more as we go through the coming hours, days, and weeks. We'll tell you as much as we know. We'll be as honest as we can with you, and certainly we'll try to fill in the blanks over the coming days and weeks. As difficult a situation as this is, we are moving forward. We have established a number of different teams. We have contingency plans for just these types of events, though we never expect to use them. We have implemented these contingency plans. We are preserving data. We are beginning thorough and complete investigations. We are mobilizing our forces, our engineers, our technicians, our safety and quality, our best experts to try and understand what went wrong. I do want to take the time right now and express my appreciation for the tremendous number of agencies that are coming to our aid from across the country, both federal, state, and local, that are assisting us in our recovery operations. I also want to express my appreciation to the public for assisting in the recovery, for notifying us of different debris, where it is located, that we might get to it as quickly as possible. It's also appropriate that we tell the public to be careful with the debris. What we fly in space is operated in many cases with toxic propellants, and some of the debris may be contaminated. So we need to be careful. And we don't wish any harm to come upon anybody that would be honestly seeking to help. At this hour, we have not positively identified any items that we have recovered. We are staging in an attempt to ensure that all recovered items are managed appropriately. But at this stage, I haven't received any real information on debris or status of crew remains. I can go back to the start of the day, filled with excitement and anticipation. Today was a great day to land in the Florida area. We had all positive indications that it was going to be like every other day where we have landed in Florida. Good weather, anxious team to welcome a fantastic crew back, families that were excited about welcoming their loved ones back, and no indications at all of any impending threats to the vehicle. The first indications of a potential problem occurred minutes before 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. The first indications were of the loss of sensors, temperature sensors in the hydraulic systems on the left wing, both the left inboard and left outboard elevon temperature sensors. They were followed seconds and minutes later by several other problems, including loss of tire pressure indications on the left main gear, and then indications of excessive structural heating. And Mr. Heflin will talk in a minute about some further details. I have to caution you that we cannot yet say what caused the loss of Columbia. It's still very early in our investigation, and it's going to take us some time to work through the evidence, the analysis, and clearly understand what the cause was. But what we are doing is we are impounding hardware so that we can preserve evidence. We have stopped processing at the Kennedy Space Center. We are preserving hardware around the country in our different facilities. We are impounding data here that represented the last data that we received from the crew. And we will be poring over that data 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future. Again, I express our sadness to the families for their loss. And we'll do our best to answer your questions.
Okay. Thanks, Ron. Milt.
First of all, just some personal observations and comments to begin with. And then I'll review some data with you. This is a bad day. I'm glad that I work and live in a country where when we have a bad day, we go fix it. Ron said, we'll fix it. I can talk to you some about what went on in the flight control room with the entry flight control team under the guidance of Flight Director Leroy Kane. Ron said it was a good day to land. In fact, many of us, as we came in today, were marveling at the fact that Leroy Kane did the ascent as well, and probably the most difficult things that we deal with during launch attempts and entries is dealing with the weather, as you all are accustomed to. And we marveled and felt good about the fact that, you know, launch, we didn't have any weather issues to work. In fact, any weather issues anywhere in the world that we were concerned about. And today it was a very minor thing to talk about, some fog, I believe, but nothing really hard to work. So, as Ron mentioned, this was a fantastic mission and just seemed to be coming to the right conclusion. Just some specifics for you, and bear with me, this is relatively recent, fresh information, and as you can imagine, in the next several hours and days, this will we'll get closer to many details, I'm sure. Around 7:53 a.m. Central Time, as Ron mentioned, we saw indication of off-scale low temperature measurements on the left inboard and outboard hydraulic systems. And this was loss of the temperature measurement. It wasn't any indication that it was high or low. We just lost it. About 3 minutes later, around 7:56 a.m., in the left main gear tire wheel well, brake line, and tire temperatures, there we saw an increase. Now, I need to tell you that during this time, the vehicle was performing fine. We had no indications of any problem. Around 7:58 a.m. Central Time, a couple of minutes later, we have what we call bond line temperatures. These are temperature sensors that are embedded in the structure of the vehicle. We have them all over the orbiter. 3 of these temperatures on the left side of the vehicle, the left wing area. The high indication, low indication, but we lost the measurements. I don't have the seconds here. Clearly, seconds will play a part in our analysis, but I'm giving this to you at the nearest minute. Around 7:59, then Central Time, left inboard and outboard tire temperatures and pressures off scale low. About eight measurements total during that time. One of these measurements sensed on board by the computers gave the crew a message, indication that they could look at on their displays. And we think they were acknowledging that measurement that they saw. Again, the vehicle was flying with no problems at that time. And when things like this happen, when a crew gets an alert, you acknowledge it, they recognize they've seen it, and then we do what we might need to do with it. And as far as I know, that was the last transmission from the crew. I've asked a couple of people, I haven't heard the tapes myself. I'm not sure what they said at the time, but they were acknowledging, we believe, that indication that they'd seen. Then we lost all vehicle data. It looks like it was around, and I apologize, it looks like my little cheat sheet here doesn't have the last Central Time on it, and I'm not going to try to convert it to you at this point, but it's around 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. Altitude was 207,135 feet, and traveling at a Mach of about 18.3. And the flight control team, during this time, again, we lost the data, and that's when we clearly begin to know that we had a bad day. That's all I've got.
Okay, thanks. As you can imagine, we have a lot of centers around the agency that are involved today, so we're going to try to limit the questions to one and try to get through as many as we can. I need you guys to do me a favor.
American citizen, but the first Indian-born woman in space. Also on board Columbia, Laurel Clark. She worked as a mission specialist. She was a medical defense on board Columbia. And finally, Elon Ramon, a payload specialist. He was also a military colonel, a former fighter pilot, but perhaps more significantly, he was Israel's first ever astronaut to go into space. That concludes this update on this national tragedy, but we will be back with several live updates throughout the day. I'm Sherry Williams reporting.
This has been a WB39 News Special Report.
Now at the different airports, and they're converging on Northeast Texas, and so that's some work that's still in front of us.
Okay.
Sig Christensen, San Antonio Express News. At this point, what is the status of the shuttle program, and particularly the upcoming missions that you're going to have? Have you decided to put all of those missions on hold, and do you have any kind of idea how long the program will be out of service?
Well, of course, this thing happened just this morning, and we put in motion some stop work types of activities. As I mentioned earlier, we've minimized our processing at the Kennedy Space Center so that we don't do anything that might disturb some evidence. We are also slowing down our manufacturing processes in a Michoud facility in Louisiana where we manufacture the external tank. We're doing that in different areas around the country for different pieces of hardware. What this slowdown means as far as the launch schedule is yet to be determined. We also will be having an investigative board outside the agency, as mentioned earlier by Mr. O'Keefe, that will come in and help resolve the situation to everybody's satisfaction so that we clearly understand what was the root cause of the problem. And once we get on a path of understanding the root cause, then we'll be better able to say whether it affects future flights. If we can put it off to the side and get it narrowed down and say, okay, we understand the root cause, here's the things we do about it or need to do about it, and then accomplish that corrective action on the other vehicle flows, then we'll be able to pick up our flight progress again. How long that's going to take, it's too early for me to tell, but I do believe that we'll continue to meet with you and keep you informed of just how this is progressing. I've talked to Mr. Bill Gerstenmaier, who is the program manager for the International Space Station program. They have scheduled they had a previously scheduled Progress launch tomorrow, and that Progress launch will proceed as scheduled. They have reviewed the contents that are going to be shipped to the space station, and those contents are appropriate given the fact that we may not be there for a while. They have enough consumables, supplies for the crew to go through the latter part of June without having a shuttle visit. So there's some time for us to work through this and get back on our schedule, and we're just going to have to work through that in the coming days and weeks, and we'll keep you informed on just the impact to the manifest. But right now, certainly there is a hold on future flights until we get ourselves established and understand the root cause to this disaster.
Okay.
My name is Jenny Blankenship. I'm a reporter with the CBS station in Austin. And I was wondering if you could explain to people who are not from this area really how tight-knit of a community this is, not just here on the NASA JSC campus, but all around here, how much of an integral part of the community this is to you all.
Well, it's more than a job. This is a passion for us. Human spaceflight is a passion. It's an emotional event. And when we work together as family members. And we treat each other much that way. And whether it's the loss of a crew member or a loss of a member of our ground team or processing teams, it's a sad loss for us. And so we are a very close community. We understand the risks that are involved in human spaceflight. And we know that these risks are manageable, but we also know that they're serious and can have deadly consequences. And so we are bound together with the threat of disaster all the time, and we know we must count on each other to do what's right. We must count on the ground teams to process correctly. We must count on our suppliers to follow the procedures just like we have identified to them. And we count on the flight crew members to fly the vehicles within the specifications. So we all rely on each other to make each space flight successful. So we have a dependency. And it's a professional dependency and it's an emotional dependency. And so when we have an event like today, where we lose 7 family members, it is devastating to us. And it's more than just us in this location. There is an emotional attachment to human space flight. It piques our interest, it captures our imagination. I received a couple of phone calls this morning, immediately following when it became apparent that Columbia was no longer going to land. One phone call was from my brother in Phoenix, Arizona, not associated with the space business. I haven't talked to him yet, I just received a message, certainly extending his thoughts and prayers. I received another phone call from my son in Provo, Utah, with the same emotional outpouring of sadness. And I'm sure this is true across the country. We're seeing that from the public. We're seeing that as people that really care about the space program and understand what it means to this nation reflect their thoughts, their prayers, their caring attitude toward us. And we want them to know we appreciate it very much. As we struggle with our emotions in this difficult time, we appreciate the thoughts, the prayers, the care, and the support. Milt, you might have some thoughts also.
Well, yeah, it is, the community out here is extremely close-knit. I've been through 3 of these. And each time, you see a coming together of the community here. Our landscape has changed. Spaceflight business today is not going to be, it's going to be much different than it was yesterday. It was different after the Apollo 1, it was different after Challenger. And it was different because this community, the passion, Ron's right, the passion is here. And as Ron was talking, I was thinking about your question, and I thought, you know, sometimes it's a shame that it takes things like this for this country to pull together and care. And it shouldn't. Damn, we're good. This country's great. It shouldn't take these kind of things to cause a coming together.
Okay, thanks.
Eric Berger with the Houston Chronicle. Milt, you mentioned about 8 sensors, and one of those which triggered some kind of notification inside the shuttle. Can you tell us which sensor that was, and whether it was an abnormal reading on whatever sensor it was, or whether it was just that the sensor was no longer functioning?
There were, in the left inboard and outboard, these are tire temperatures on the left-hand side, okay? Temps and pressures, and Ron, help me out here if I get that mixed up. And they all went what we call off-scale low. In other words, there's a bottom number 0, or maybe not 0, not necessarily 0, but there's a bottom number of the measurement. They all just went off-scale low, indicating loss of the measurement itself. You know, and I cannot tell you specifically which one of the 8. We'll find that out, but I don't have that right now. No.
An easy way to think about that is the measurement was no longer reading. It was not giving an indication. It's as if someone just cut the wire.
Okay, right over here.
Chris Heinbaugh with WFAA TV in Dallas. You indicated that at 7:53 was the first, you first lost some sensor information, and you indicated towards the end there was an acknowledgement from the crew. During the rest of that time period, was there any dialogue, any communication with the crew during that period? And if there was there any indication from them that there was a problem that they could see on board?
Yes, at 7:53 a.m., we did have another set of 4 measurements in the hydraulic system on the left-hand side that went off-scale low. Now, this was reported by the flight controller responsible for the mechanical and hydraulic systems in the orbiter, reported to the flight director. When this happens, then it's followed up by if there's any action to take, if there's anything that we see that needs to be done, that flight controller will tell the flight director and a crew, and a call might go to the crew. These were measurements that did not have, we have many measurements on board. Not all of them are enunciated to the crew. They don't need to be. And we see a lot more information on the ground than they do. So they did not see this. So they had no indication. We saw nothing else to indicate any difficulty at all, because had we seen anything else, we would have taken some action. That's, you know, we work very hard. We train very hard to react in a very short amount of time to situations. But we don't, if we don't have anything that we see that we've got to do, then we don't spend the time talking about it, because we focus on the next event and so forth.
Right here next to him.
I'm Brian Sasser, KTRK TV here in Houston. We'd heard some reports that during launch there had been some concerns that some debris hit the wing. Is that true, and is that any cause of concern that could have caused today's problems?
It is true that right after launch, and I don't remember the time frame as far as seconds, there was a piece of foam that is used as insulation on the external tank in the area of what we call the bipod, which is the forward attach between the orbiter and the external tank. There is a piece of foam that was shed, and in our review the following day of the launch films, we saw this piece of debris drop off, and it looked to us like it impacted the orbiter on the left wing. Where on the left wing, it's very difficult for us to tell. Somewhere between the mid and outward span. Was it the leading edge? We don't know. Was it underneath the leading edge? We really don't know. To the best of our ability, that's what happened. We spent a goodly amount of time reviewing that film and then analyzing what that potential impact of debris on the wing might do, and would there be any consequences. Through analysis and through our ability to call back on our experience with tile, it was judged that that event did not represent a safety concern. And so the technical community got together and across the country looked at it and judged that to be acceptable. And so as we look at that now in hindsight, that impact was on the left wing. And certainly we have all the indications that Milt talked to you about were on the left wing. We can't discount that there might be a connection. But we have to caution you and ourselves that we can't rush to judgment on it, because there are a lot of things in this business that look like the smoking gun but turn out not even to be close. And so we really have to do some regression analysis. We've got to look at what Milt described to you, and then back up in time through analysis to see if we can piece together the events and whether or not this was a tile problem or whether it was a structural issue or some other event. We don't know yet. What will help us determine that is inspecting the debris. That will really help us. And so we're very anxious to get certain pieces back to look at, and that will determine whether or not this particular event, whether it was the debris hitting the orbiter or some other event, was a cause of this problem or this disaster today.
Okay, get that gentleman right back behind him.
Ryan Korsgaard from KVUE TV in Austin. You talked a little bit about the hardware. What goes forward now with the astronaut training? Does that continue? Does that stop? What happens?
Well, there's going to be a period of mourning in this community. There's going to be a period where we're just going to get together and support each other and hug each other and help us go on. But we're going to fix this problem. We're going to get back on the launch pad. We're going to launch shuttles again as soon as we're ready. The training is going to continue. The best therapy in this business is to get on with your job. The best therapy in the flight control world is to get in that control center and train for the next mission. The best therapy in the flight crew world is to continue with their training. Stay focused on the job ahead. Stay focused on what we need to accomplish, and that's what we are all going to do. There's going to be a subset of us that will be working together to resolve this problem. And we will do that, and we will do that quickly, efficiently, and we'll do it safely, and we will not fly again until we have this understood. In the meantime, life goes on, training goes on. We'll start manufacturing hardware again as soon as we know that we have preserved evidence. So in a few days, I suspect we will start pulling things back to what we understand and releasing certain activities to start up again. But in the next several days, it's going to be a period of quiet, of reflection, and where are we going to go from here as far as what we need to do to resolve this issue.
Okay, Greg, let's work on the second row. Start right here on the end.
Rashonda Tate, Fox 26 News. Did you have a device on board that is the equivalent of a black box?
No, we don't. We do not have a hardened black box data recorder or voice recorder. We do have recorders. We do have recorders of both data and voice. If they survived the entry and the impact, we will certainly look to see if there's any information there. As Milt mentioned to you on the timeline, he talked to you a little bit about these sensors that just kind of quit working. We also know that during this time frame, the vehicle was operating perfectly. It had gone into a roll reversal, which is a standard maneuver where the vehicle banks left or banks right. It's a standard maneuver, and when it does so to bleed off energy, and you do a number of these roll reversals so that you land at the right speed right at the Kennedy Space Center. It had rolled itself into a roll reversal, and everything from a flight control perspective was perfect. No indications of any problems. So we have some indications that it wasn't a vehicle loss of control issue, and so we're getting some hints of where we need to go look. Whether or not these recorders survived and will be useful to us, I'm not really sure that's going to be the case.
Okay. Anybody on the next person with his hand up there?
Jake Dyer, Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I have a couple of questions. Regarding the, whatever it was, the foam that apparently fell off the vehicle at takeoff, was there any consideration during the flight that perhaps an EVA would be necessary, that you guys need to go out and take a look? Secondarily, I'm wondering about, you guys talked about loss of sensor readings and sort of unusual sensor readings. Could you give us a sense about how unusual that is? I mean, does that happen with any frequency, or was that something that was alarming that you'd never seen before?
The easy answer is the sensor reading, and yes, that happens. The fact that you have a sensor that just quits working is not an alarming factor. In fact, we understand that several sensors can quit working, and they're all a result of not the sensor quitting to work, they're a result of a box, an avionics box, a signal conditioner, or a multiplexer, demultiplexer that happens to fail, and its signature to you and me is the fact that it looks like someone just cut the wire. And we've seen this on occasion, and we certainly trained for it many, many times over. So it is not unusual for us when we see it to look at it and immediately start to understand whether it is a single sensor problem or it's an avionics box. The team today looked at it as they are trained to do and could not see any common thread between this sensor and another sensor. There's nothing common about it, and so that made it more significant. As soon as we understood it wasn't a common avionics box and that there were multiple sensors, all completely independent, and all this happened in a very short period of time, we knew that something was not right. Now you asked me something else on the phone.
The idea of a spacewalk.
Oh, the spacewalk. We do not have the capability to perform a spacewalk and do tile repair. We do not have the capability. As you know, when we go out of the spacecraft, we operate really within the confines of the payload bay. On this particular mission, there was no remote manipulator system. There was no arm. And so all we had trained to do from a spacewalk perspective were those things that might be an emergency, or a latch did not work in the payload bay door closing sequence or something like that. We can go outside and make sure the payload bay doors are closed. We have no capability to go over the side of the vehicle and go underneath the vehicle and look for an area of distress and repair of tile. We know we have no capability. If for some reason we thought we had a tile problem, the risk you take when you launch is that you may suffer a tile issue. We have no capability to repair it. All we can do is, before we launch, design robustness into the system so that a loss of some tile capability will not result in loss of crew or vehicle. Does that answer your question? We have no capability to do that today. There is no capability to inspect it. We are not able to look on the underside of the vehicle. And again, our rationale, our retention rationale, why we believe we can continue to fly safely, is that we test our tiles on the ground. They're robust, they're hard enough to withstand certain levels of impact, and then we design our environment so that we don't have, at this point, that the impact of that ET debris on the tile was the cause of our problem. We convinced ourselves as we analyzed it 10 days ago that it was not going to represent a safety issue. Now, we had the events of this morning. We're going to go back and see if there is connection. Is that the smoking gun? It is not. We don't know enough about it. A lot more analysis and evidence needs to come to the table. So it's not fair to represent the tile damage as the source. It's just something we need to go look at.
Yeah, grab right there next to you. No, right here next, yeah.
Gina Treadgold with ABC News. There are reports from an astronomer at Caltech that the shuttle debris was flying off the shuttle as early as a flyover in Owens Valley in California. How does that match up with this timeline, and are you aware of those reports?
It's news, isn't it?
Well, I haven't heard that report. And sometimes as you go through entry and are in a plasma, sometimes you see plasma. It looks like debris, but it's really not debris, it's plasma. It's just the fact that you're going really fast through the atmosphere. If he saw something over Hawaii, recognize we flew a good long while before we got to the Texas area. And so it's doubtful that we had something in Hawaii that would cause us a thermal concern. At the time that we believe we lost the vehicle, as Milt explained, it was about Mach 18, or 18 times the speed of sound. We were at our peak heating. We were at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the wing leading edge. And if we did have a structural problem or a thermal problem, you would expect to get it at the peak heating, not back at Hawaii when you weren't suffering any real thermal environment, extreme thermal environment. The most extreme thermal environment was right at Mach 18. And that's where we lost the vehicle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Dittemore, Ann Gesselman with Newsweek. You mentioned in your opening comments that there was indication of excessive structural heating. When did that happen in the timeline from 7:53 and on? And secondly, at any point between 7:53 and 8 a.m., were the folks in Mission Control worried?
Let's see, you respond about the Mission Control. Let me talk about these bond line temps. We mentioned that, and I might have overstated it when I said excessive heating, because as I look at the notes here, the bond line temps on the left side of the vehicle were off scale low, which means it looked like the rest of the measurements, it looked like they had been cut. So I probably misspoke on that by saying excessive heating. It really is that we lost those measurements too. The mood in my area where I observe the flight control team was very upbeat, and then we started to understand a little bit about these multiple loss of sensors. We recognized there was no commonality. We lost voice with the crew. We lost tracking data. We had no TV. As we came to find out later, we saw the TV reports of debris. We did not have that at the time. And so we were very anxious because we knew we were in an area of good communication coverage. We were in an area where we should have tracking, and we had lost both. And as we started adding all these up, we were certainly most anxious.
Get this gentleman right behind you. There you go.
Ron, Thayer Evans from the Daily Oklahoman in Oklahoma City. Can you confirm reports of debris in other states besides Texas, namely Oklahoma, and also offer your thoughts on Mike Anderson?
I can't confirm any debris in Oklahoma, and I would doubt any debris in Oklahoma because our ground track was basically just north of Dallas on a path that went through northeast Texas, Nacogdoches area from northwest to southeast. That's going to be the ground track. That's going to be the interest of our search. Mike Anderson, I suspect you asked me because we are both from the same hometown. Mike and I, we have common backgrounds. He attended my rival high school. He graduated from Cheney High School. I graduated much earlier than he did, I'm sad to say, but from Medical Lake High School, and we were arch rivals. And he and I had a good communication going about that. He grew up on an Air Force base, Fairchild Air Force Base, Spokane, Washington. I also grew up in Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane. He went to the same grade school I did. We had a very common early beginning, but I told him that I was his pathfinder. And so we had a good relationship. And we talked many times about how he had met his wife in Spokane. I also met my wife in Spokane. His parents lived there, my parents lived there, my wife's parents lived there. A lot of commonality. I'm going to miss Mike. I'm going to miss the closeness that we had.
Okay, you reach this person right here.
Sanjay Bhatt, Cox News Service and Palm Beach Post. We heard earlier today that this crew was very passionate about the work they were doing, the scientific experiments that they were conducting, and we heard that that their loss would not be in vain. What I'm wondering is how many of the experiments aboard, in terms of the data being collected, required that the astronauts in the craft return safely to Earth? And because there were some new laboratory modules on this craft, is there anything to suggest that those could have contributed at all to what we saw?
Well, Ron, I don't have the answer to it. Maybe you do on the number of experiments that we have to have the return of the heart. I don't have that. I'm sure we can get that for you. And I can't imagine a space hab being on board back in the cargo bay had anything to do with this.
Let me just say something about the science. This vehicle on orbit, we kind of pinched ourselves over the past 16 days. This vehicle performed flawlessly, absolutely flawlessly. Science was a premium. The folks on the ground were just ecstatic with the amount of science that they were reaping, and they were looking forward to getting much of that information back on the ground. Certainly some of it was downlinked to the ground prior to entry. Some of it will be their legacy. Others had to come back and be analyzed, in which that particular part of the science would be lost. But it was an amazing mission, and we were ecstatic over the results and looking forward to talking to the crew and telling them what a great job they had done. And so it is a painful experience for us to lose our friends and recognize that things were going so well and turned out so badly.
Valor Time Magazine, could you share with us the last words that came from the crew?
Well, a while ago, the last transmission that we got was, it had to do, I think a while ago I discussed that there was a measurement that gave an indication to the crew and an alert that they acknowledged. I can't tell you what they said at that time. I don't know what the word was, but it was the sort of thing that when something like that occurs, that the crew's response is fairly typical, just to let the ground know we see that. That's how the routine works, and that was the last transmission from the crew that I am aware of. And I think as we go, as we go through and peel this apart, we'll have more information like that we can share with you.
Okay, I got time for 2 more questions here before I need to go to the other NASA centers. Grab this gentleman and then this young lady on the next row.
Elizabeth Lee with KHWB Television. A brief loss of communication, has that happened before during re-entry? And if so, when you did lose communication, was there still hope that perhaps it was just brief? And at what point did you realize that it was something more grave?
We lose communication from time to time for various reasons. We certainly lose it during the orbit phase. We've lost it sometimes for a whole revolution of 90 minutes. On entry, though, we understand that any dropouts generally are brief, and if they do occur, they occur during the peak heating time frames when the plasma around the vehicle as it is at its maximum extent. And so a brief dropout at this time period is no reason for us to be concerned. Our experience is we gain it back fairly quickly. Our concern at this time was that as we made several calls to them, they did not respond. We made several more calls to them via UHF, which is usually as reliable as anything, and they did not respond. And it became apparent to us that we were in difficult circumstances.
Okay, last question right there. Go ahead.
When you guys first got that anomalous sort of readings where you were unclear of, something strange is going on, at that point, was it a situation where you guys were committed? I mean, there was nothing you could have done about it. As soon as, when you first saw those readings at things went blank or whatever, was there any corrective action whatsoever at that point that you could have done?
Nothing that we could do. Just observe and see if there was going to be any future downstream impact to the landing. In fact, if that's all we did was lose those 12-odd sensors, no impact to this flight at all. We'd have come back and repaired the sensors. They don't impact the flying qualities of the vehicle. They don't impact the insight into how we control the vehicle. All they do is provide us information on how the systems performed so that when we turn around the vehicle for the next flight, gives us indications of where we should look. did not affect and would not affect the flight given just the sensor by itself.
Okay, let's go to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida for questions, please.
Yes, this is Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. Ron, I have a written report from earlier in this flight that there was a potential for a large damage area to the tile, and given that, I'm wondering how and why was it deemed minor by NASA? And do you have any idea how much of a damage area may have been left on the left wing and how big that piece of foam was that came off?
We have a pretty good idea how big the size of foam was. What we don't understand very well was what the actual impact did to the tile. And so we have to use our analysis and our engineering expertise to help us understand how a piece of foam of certain weight and density impacting the wing at certain velocity, what it does to the tile. And our experts gathered together, and we have people in this system that have worked on these tiles since the beginning of the program, and we understand how the tiles function, we understand the tile's ability to withstand damage, we understand the thermal characteristics of the tile both on the surface of the tile and at the base of the tile. And as we got together and reviewed this information, we were convinced technically and analytically that the tile would not, the impact of the debris on the tile would not represent a safety of flight issue. In fact, we were anxious to come back and get the handheld film that the crew takes as soon as they get to orbit of the external tank. As it's moving away, we asked them to take pictures of the external tank so we can understand exactly where the foam was shed from the tank. And we were anxious to get that piece of information because we felt that we needed to analyze it so that it would not occur on future flights. We have a flight readiness review coming up for the next flight. It was scheduled for February the 20th, and we knew we had some technical work to do to make sure that we understood why this piece of debris came off. We were not concerned with Columbia. We felt we had analyzed that, and we felt we understood it such that it was not a thermal concern to us, did not represent a control issue or a safety of flight issue. And again, I'm going to caution you that that is the case today. We have no information that would say that is not the case. We are going to go look at it again to see if there is a connection between what Milt talked to you about and the fact that we had a debris impact on the tile. And there's some other things we need to go look at. The tile is just one. And so we were satisfied that we did the proper work. And across the community, our safety, our quality, our crew members, our flight controllers, and the program management reviewed the technical analysis and agreed to a person that it was not an impact to this flight. So we need to go back and look at that, of course, but that's the events as they unfolded.
From Florida today. I'm sorry to ask another question about the external tank, but has this happened before? Has foam come off the tank? Has it impacted the shuttle? And what were the consequences that you saw?
We had an event on STS-112 just several flights ago where a piece of debris from the same general area was shed by the tank. And this particular debris, and I can't tell you today whether it's of the same general size, but it came from the same general area, and it impacted the aft skirt on one of the boosters. Superficial damage occurred. When we got the booster back in port and looked at it, evaluated it, reviewed it technically, discussed it at the following flight readiness review, which was STS-13. We as an agency, as a shuttle program, decided that that did not represent a technical safety risk to us. We have from time to time debris. Ice can come off the tank. frost, pieces of debris, and they impact the bottom of the vehicle. Several years ago, we had a problem where during the launch phase, we were popcorning pieces of this insulation on the tile. It would effectively reach a certain point in the ascent, and it would popcorn out and impact the bottom of the vehicle, and it would cause damage to the tile, but not damage that was a concern from a safety standpoint, damage that when we got back we had to repair or maybe replace a tile. We have subsequently fixed that problem, and as we were looking at this particular problem of debris shedding in this one bipod region on STS-112, we said, well, we've got an area that we need to fix, and we have a turnaround discussion, but not a safety of flight issue. We flew STS-113. We didn't shed any external tank debris. On STS-107, as we looked at the films on the following day, we saw the same type of debris being shed from the same location. In this case, it didn't impact the booster. It impacted the left wing. So again, 2 occurrences in the last 3 flights is certainly the signal to our team that something has changed. It did not represent, on the first occasion, an alarm from a safety point of view. It represented a turnaround processing issue. As we go forward in our investigation, we're certainly going to look in this area and determine whether or not this was a contributor to the loss of Columbia and the loss of the crew.
This is Mike Cabbage with the Orlando Sentinel. Ron, could you talk a little about who all and what all was involved in the analysis of the tile issue after launch? Did you ever give any thought to using telescopes to look for signs of damage to the orbiter? And if you had detected extensive damage to the TPS, is there anything you could have done with the angle of attack or anything else during re-entry to have reduced stress on that part of the vehicle?
The easy part of that question is there's nothing that we can do about tile damage once we get to orbit. We can't minimize the heating to the point that it would somehow not require a tile. And so once you get to orbit, you're there and you have your tile insulation, and that's all you have for protection on the way home.
You have been listening live to a news conference at the Johnson Space Center conducted by Ron Ditmore, the NASA program manager, and Milt Heflin, the chief flight director, the 2 men who know absolutely the most about this flight of the shuttle orbiter Columbia and the disaster that occurred this morning. We learned from this news conference there was a loss of telemetry from heat sensors in the left wing, a couple of them, just moments before breakup. Then there was the loss of telemetry from an air pressure sensor in the left main landing gear, the tire pressure, air pressure in the tire of the landing gear. That was lost. NASA ground controllers were questioning the commander of the flight about the loss of that tire pressure when communication was lost and the shuttle Columbia disintegrated in the skies over north central Texas with the loss of all 7 crewmen on board. We also learned or heard more.
Trying to understand, especially at the first event, the 753 event, specifically where those sensors are located relative to the wing structure or the main body structure. Can you describe that in a little more detail?
Yeah, they were located at the left inboard elevon and the left outboard elevon, and recall the elevons are at the back part of the wing. They're the trailing edge of the wing. And the impact, if you were trying to relate tile damage to the elevon, the impact was, of course, on the front edge of the wing. You can't draw any conclusions from this yet. We can't. It's just data that we need to go pore over and understand. If you looked at the sequence of events, Craig.
On the takeoff, and he said that it did hit the tile on the left wing. Now, this shows the Columbia from another side, so this is the right wing. But go ahead and zoom in here, and we will show you the tile he's talking about. What he said was that they still are not sure how that little piece of insulation that fell off at takeoff may have impacted the tile on that left wing. They spent about 10 days, they said, analyzing this and decided that it wasn't a problem. Now they're talking about problems in that left wing right before they lost contact, but they cautioned America, and they said they're going to have to remind themselves not to make a leap to judgment. At the same time, they say they can't discount the possibility that perhaps that problem on the takeoff may be related to what happened early this morning. They say they are going to have data processors working 24 hours a day from here on out to go ahead and analyze and see what happened out here. Let's tell you a little bit about what they said emotionally. You may have noticed both men, both the program manager and the chief flight director, who just spoke to you live here from Johnson Space Center. Both sounded very emotional, choked back tears, especially when they first began to talk, because their first words weren't about science or technology, but obviously the loss of human life and the sorrow they felt for the families, extending their condolences. They said this area, not just Johnson Space Center, but the people who live around here in the Clear Lake area feel very much like a community. They described it as a professional dependency and an emotional dependency, and now they are trying to go ahead and regroup here emotionally before they look into exactly what went wrong. There was an important question asked about whether there was anything like a black box recorder that would be on planes. They said there wasn't anything such as a black box, but there were data and flight recorders, and if they survived, they could help. But looking at what happened there in the sky, that may be very difficult to do. Reporting live from Johnson Space Center, Patrick Nolan, 13 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Patrick. And of course, now our hearts and prayers in this area go out to the families of the astronauts, the wives, the husbands, the children who lost their husbands or wives in this catastrophe today.
One great big family, however, in the Clear Lake area and all around the Johnson Space Center, actually broadening out, I think, across the entire Houston area. But we do have Tom Abrams now at a very popular restaurant, a hangout for many of the folks from NASA, Frenchie's Restaurant in Clear Lake. And Tom, tell me what the mood is there.
Well, certainly one of disbelief. It's very somber there. As people come in, they spend more time looking at the television at the latest reports than they do actually eating the meals they've ordered. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment, but I want to bring someone else who is very familiar here in Clear Lake to you, and that's U.S. Congressman Nick Lamson. Obviously, NASA is in your district. You're very familiar with what goes on here, a member of the House Aerospace Subcommittee. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, they are, like you just said, somewhat disbelief. It was an amazing feat to watch and to see play out this morning, and learning that these people had died, and along with them the dreams of a lot of folks. But at the same time, we know that there's risk involved in the tasks that they're involved with. Science is risky. Doing things where people have not gone before is indeed something that we know is potential for us not to succeed with. We'll grieve for the families. We'll grieve for the loss of these people who are friends and who are co-workers of the folks here in the Clear Lake area. But we'll pick up the pieces and we'll move forward with our space program, because that's what they dreamed of.
What role do you think Washington will play in trying to help determine independently what caused this?
Well, I doubt, first of all, that Congress itself will appoint an investigative committee. I think that the oversight committee that's or process that's provided through the authorizing committees of the Space and the Space Subcommittee on Science will be part of it. And I think that if there is a special committee made, it will more than likely be something like what was created during the Challenger tragedy, which was a committee appointed by the President. The report that came from that committee was brought first to the committees within the House of Representatives and Senate. And from there, we went forward doing the appropriations necessary to get this program back moving again.
Something well publicized here in the Houston area is the perceived lack of funding for NASA. I know you fought very hard on Capitol Hill to get NASA as much as it can, because it so very much affects this area. Do you see this one way or the other affecting the kind of money that NASA gets in the near future?
Well, if anything, it's going to affect it positively. It's more than likely going to show that that we have specific needs that must be addressed. Just the fact of the tragic event itself will cause an expenditure of unexpected funding. So yes, there's probably going to be a greater expenditure of funds around NASA and a greater commitment to what we're attempting to do with the science that's involved with all of that.
All right, thank you very much. Congressman Nick Lamson represents here in the Clear Lake area. We also want to talk about this restaurant here. You might wonder, as Congressman Lamson leaves, why we'd be standing in front of a restaurant. It's one of these places where people who work for NASA just go all the time. It's one of the hangouts. It's one of the places they enjoy. And we're going to show you some videos. Right as you walk in and you go by the register, you're able to see all kinds of pictures from various STS missions. In fact, there is one from STS-107. The crew was here several times before their launch. In fact, there you see a picture in which they came in as a group to celebrate astronaut Willie McCool's birthday back in September. The owner who you see there, Frankie Camera, says that the astronauts are as much family as they are customers to him, and when he learned this morning of what had happened, it really hit him hard.
Number 47, please. You know, knowing these people, they're just like part of a family, you know, after a while. And plus, they're really, this particular group, they were so kind and so incredible human being that, you know, I felt like it was a part of me, of my family. That's how I felt this morning, and I just can believe, I still cannot believe it, that this happened.
And that is one thing you'll find here in Clear Lake, obviously throughout the Houston area, but specifically in this community, people are so entrenched in the NASA culture that when something happens positively or negatively to any branch of that administration, it feels as though it hits them within their own family. And so that's something that we're going to continue to hear over the next few days, that these people feel as though it really hit them in their own heart, in their own homes. Of course, we'll bring you more from here later on Eyewitness News. Reporting live for now from Clear Lake, Tom Abrams, 13 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Tom. Certainly Ron Dittmore and Milt Heflin were referring to that as well, saying that in times of tragedy like this, we pull together as a country and certainly as a community, and it's a shame that it takes a tragedy in order to make us feel that way. But we've seen throughout today with our live pictures from our various locations, even where debris is being found, that there are just crowds of people gathered, part of it because they want to witness the history, but also because they just want to be there in case there's something that they can do to help.
Right. Well, then, and this is happening all over East Texas. Hundreds of square miles where this debris has fallen. We received an indication of what that white powdery stuff might be. This was a transmission to us from a technician who worked on the heat shield from the pre-first flight through STS-5. We've all heard of these people talking about a white powder that they found on the ground in some spots. This technician says that white powder that people have seen is probably from the heat shield tiles. It is essentially white spun glass. It's a very light material, similar in feel to what flower arrangements are put into. This comes from an engineer technician who worked on the heat shield tiles from before the first shuttle flight through STS-5. That the white powder, the heat shield tiles are essentially white spun glass. That may be what that mysterious white powder is.
Moments ago, we saw crowds of people gathered outside the gates of the Johnson Space Center. They closed the gates and are only allowing in essential personnel as well as news media now. Our Deborah Wrigley is down at the Johnson Space Center, and she can tell us more about what's happening there.
The crowd's still over there, Shara, but in them, we met an interesting person. He is with us now, Gary Mead, who was involved with the Space Shuttle program in the beginning days. He has since retired from NASA, but he has been very trained on the television with all the news coming out of it. We've been having a lot of discussions about what may have happened here. What are some of the questions running through your mind?
Well, certainly, Deborah, before anything, condolences go out to the families of the crew, but just the instant silence seems to be the question that at least in my mind would raise, that there was no pre-warning or signal of something that was up other than his last telemetry communications that occurred.
And that's what you worked in. You worked in telemetry, which is all the communications with the spacecraft.
That's correct.
The wing, the insulation, the tires. We've been having discussions about those heat tiles. It's your feeling those tiles really wouldn't have done any damage to speak of?
Well, certainly I couldn't speculate. You know, we've got minds that are far more trained in that respect, but certainly the tiles themselves, as we just heard reported, that the white powder, those objects break up more than they would, I would assume, do any serious damage to it. But whether some unseen damage occurred underneath where those tiles then certainly some sort of catastrophic damage could have occurred.
And you knew when there was no communication, they should have been in communication at that point. That wasn't that blackout window.
Well, again, you know, as in anything, certain things happen. We watch TV and the TV blacks out on occasion, but I think that the reports that they were given that they were trying to communicate several different times, then went to UHF, that they probably knew that something had occurred.
And if they were up there, I guess, if there had been a catastrophe involving those heat tiles, there really wasn't anything to be done.
Well, again, you know, in speculation, unfortunately, there's not a repair station for the shuttle up in outer space, so they could do whatever. If they were sent up within the time frame to make repairs to it, but not knowing if actually any damage had occurred, it would be hard to address it.
Tell me about those fuels, how flammable they are. What do they carry on board?
Well, a liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. As far as some of the other toxic chemicals, it's been years since I've been around it, so I don't know whether there's been different items that they've included or different items that they've removed from it. But certainly, you know, space is still a highly dangerous occupation. However, it's a needed thing that our country has to have. We've invested a lot of time, effort, lives, and certainly we need to go forward and learn what happened so that it never happens again.
Mr. Mead, thank you very much. Very interesting discussion we've been having here. We're as interested as everyone else in finding out what happened on this. Back to you.
Okay,
All right, Deborah, thank you,
Deborah. And in the area where the debris field all over East Texas, Eyewitness News reporter Jessica Willey standing by in Nacogdoches, where people are coming from all around looking at this stuff and reporting more and more, finding stuff out in fields, pastures, in the woods and stuff. Tell us what's the latest, Jessica.
Absolutely. Usually this is a sleepy town on a Saturday, but certainly there is a lot of activity here now. Traffic is gridlock, and you see a lot of people just hanging around. We're in downtown Nacogdoches, and just because it is the center of town, this piece of debris, as you're seeing right now, is a piece that most people started noticing early this morning, and therefore a lot of people started coming out. This site has also now become the site of a makeshift memorial. As you can see right there to the right, some people have been bringing flowers now and patriotic symbols, because as everybody has been saying all day long, you know, these astronauts, the shuttle crew, definitely seen as national heroes. And then just beyond on the other side of this parking lot, this bank parking lot, you can see that cross there. Well, National Guardsmen put that cross up earlier today. So definitely this has become a makeshift memorial to the shuttle crew. Everybody's calling them heroes. But I do have some new information from a press conference. We just got this new information just within the last hour or so about how they are collecting this debris, because as Dave mentioned, it is strewn for miles all over East Texas. Now, they said that they are tracking these phone calls. People are calling, and they say that they've gotten about 500 reports of debris all over the area. They say every time they get a phone call, they dispatch a National Guardsman. Actually, a crew of 2 National Guardsmen go out to the area to cordon it off and to guard it until NASA can get to it. Now, they said that they were very lucky because this weekend the National Guard was here doing a drill this weekend, and that they were able to be in place quickly. They were able to mobilize quickly and then be able to start handling this disaster fairly quickly. Now, NASA has asked also for volunteer firefighters. Basically, what they're saying is once they get a sighting of debris, they're asking these volunteer firefighters to search about a 100-meter perimeter around the debris site so they can search for any other debris that has fallen. That's volunteer firefighters are doing that. 2 astronauts from NASA were here earlier today. They flew in via helicopter. They wanted to give guidance as to how county officials should handle this disaster. Basically, they've set up priorities. The priority first are the astronauts, and then they're looking for the control module part of the shuttle. Those are the priorities. Now, county officials are also working with the university. A GPS system at the university is going to end up helping NASA mark all of these debris sightings so that they can put them on a computer module, send it to NASA, and then they can get a map, really, of where all of this debris is strewn all across these hundreds of miles. They're asking for volunteers. They're also, DPS is sending about 100 officers. They're setting up staging areas, and they're also holding meetings every 2 hours, command meetings every 2 hours. But first and foremost, they're thinking about these astronauts and their families. We heard from Sue Kennedy. She is the county judge here in Nacogdoches County. She talked about what they're doing before each command meeting.
We did start out our first command meeting here once we had everybody gathered with a prayer for the astronauts, for their families, for all of our emergency responders, for our citizens here in Nacogdoches County. We can't forget that what we are dealing with here is a tremendous tragedy, and we have to react to it with all the dignity and respect that is due everybody that's involved.
Now, obviously, there are a lot of curiosity seekers, as you can see all around me, but a lot of people are also coming to these debris sites to pay their respect. I spoke to one man who's originally from Houston, and he was fighting back the tears. He says, you know, his thoughts and prayers are with the families and friends and of these astronauts. Certainly that is the priority. People are thinking about them first, and then all this debris that is strewn all across the countryside here. And we've been getting just a lot of people coming up to us. They're saying, hey, there's debris here, there's debris here. We've seen debris as small as about a 1 inch in diameter to as large as I would liken it to the size of a car hood. That was dropped in the backyard of an elderly woman's home this morning. I asked people, well, what was it like when, you know, when they think that this debris was raining down on the area? They said first they heard a large boom, or they even saw like windows rattle. They say that, you know, they said it was crazy, but they thought maybe there was an earthquake that was happening here in East Texas, but then they realized it wasn't an earthquake. They turned on their TVs, their radios, and they heard what was happening, and then a lot of them heard like large thumps on the ground when this debris actually hit the ground. But certainly we've been seeing a lot of these pieces all around, and then that white powder. And Dave, I know that you we talked about what we think this white powder might be. Certainly that's something that a lot of people are curious about as well.
Okay.
Right, Jessica Willey, thank you, reporting from Nacogdoches. Art Rascone is in San Augustine now. Earlier this morning, we were getting all kinds of phone-in reports from San Augustine as well, and the county, debris paths strewn all across that area as well. Let's go to Art right now.
All right, hello, Shara. Dave from San Augustine County. This is where there has been a great deal of effort on everyone's part. So many volunteer fire departments have gathered here at this location. This is the command post. Behind me, you can see several folks here gathering. These are from counties throughout the area, throughout eastern Texas as well. And this is the last county you'll see before you head off to Louisiana as well. So it is an entire East County effort to try and find debris, to locate it, to secure it, as well as try and find out if there's any evidence, other evidence outside of that any of these officials can obtain. As well, you have off to my other side, under the blue tarp, and we're not allowed to get any closer than we are right now. The FBI is over there. They have a crew of about close to a dozen FBI agents, investigators as well. Now, initially, this wasn't sparked as an FBI investigation because no terrorism was believed to be involved, but yet FBI is here and still trying to determine as well what their involvement will be. They have been heading out with various crews, searching and as well looking at various places of debris. The group here behind me, they're dividing up into various teams. What they're going to be doing is they have this entire San Augustine County as well as nearby counties divided up into a grid. And what they're going to be doing is sending out these teams on a 24-hour basis. And we have as well ATVs out here, several of them, because this is a pretty rough area, pretty rough county, and lots of rural spots around here, so it's going to be very difficult indeed to be able to find anyone. We even have a couple of volunteers, in fact, that perhaps I can talk to over here. I was speaking with you earlier. What was your name again, ma'am?
Paula Sowell.
Paula. And why are you out here?
I'm in the volunteer fire department for Denning, New Hope, and just trying to do what we can to help.
And I understand they might be using you and heading you out into various groups to search.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been told you might have to do?
The only thing they've told us to do is just to secure the area and try to keep the public safe.
What about you, ma'am? I know that you're a part of this in some way as well.
I'm just here to give my support to them. That's my daughter, and I want to help her if I can.
And it must be awful just to even have to undergo these circumstances of even having to be here. I mean, it's not a circumstance that anyone would have to involve themselves with.
My heart goes out to these people. because I've been through it. Not this, but something I've been through, tragedy.
Yeah.
And this is sad to me.
Absolutely. Sad to everyone as well. As we head back over to this area of where the volunteers are continuing to work, we're not allowed to get any closer than what we are right now, but we've been told by the lieutenant in charge as well that they're breaking up into various search teams, groups of about 6 or 8. They have folks from all around the surrounding counties here. This is an area that's going to be extremely difficult to find any debris. Now, several pieces of debris have been spotted already. We found several just along the road. They're all cordoned off. They're being held off, and no one's trying to touch them. And federal authorities hopefully will get a hold of them and, of course, take it back to either Houston or Florida to try and piece all of this back together as to what happened. A tragedy indeed, and something that everyone is emotionally involved with here in this county. And all of these local agencies, a very somber mood, and you can see it among the group as well, and as they continue to talk about it and try and discuss what their next move will be. They've already sent out several groups. More groups will be going out. It will be an effort that will be lasting probably most of the night. And, of course, we will be here as well for you, bringing it to you. Live in St. Augustine County, Art Rascon, 13 Eyewitness News. Dave, Shara.
Okay. Thank you, Art. Thank you very much. We are joined here on the set here at Channel 13 by Charles Bolden, a former astronaut, a member of the astronaut community who flew on 4 shuttle flights, retired from the astronaut corps now and lives in the city of Houston, lives in the Houston area. Charlie, thank you for coming down to be with us today. This is a tragic day for all of us, and especially among the astronaut community.
It is indeed, and first of all, I join everybody, I guess, in expressing my sympathy to the families and to everybody on the NASA team, because this is a very difficult time, as we all learned, 17 years ago when we lost Challenger.
Right.
Charlie, you were the pilot aboard Columbia on the mission that preceded the Challenger disaster. Tell us a little bit about re-entry and what's going on for the astronauts inside the shuttle as they're making that descent into the Earth's atmosphere.
Re-entry, like ascent, is one of the, there's never a non-critical time of the flight, but those are the 2 most critical times because they're very dynamic. Things are happening very fast. Re-entry, however, is a thrilling time for the crew because of the light show that you get, because it's much smoother than the ascent. There's not a lot of vibration and shaking and no noise and fire. The most exciting part about re-entry is the phase in which the crew was probably just leaving, and that's when you finally get back into the atmosphere at about 400,000 feet and the vehicle starts to heat up as it's bombarded by molecules of air. It'll heat up to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit on the bottom where the black tiles are, and can get as hot as 3,000, 3,100 degrees on the leading edge of the wing and the nose. And as that happens, it begins to glow like anything will, like an ember. And the way that you see it in the shuttle is that along the bottom of the window, it gets kind of pinkish and then starts to move up the windscreen until finally it's all obliterated by this pink turning to white, and it's like being inside a light bulb.
And yet they were still in communication with NASA. Today they were. We know that.
In the old days, when you went through the heating, you were blacked out because all of our communications went through ground communication stations. Today, we use tracking and data relay satellites, so we can use antenna on the top of the orbiter, which is out of the area of blackout where the ionization takes place.
And you told me that they actually start re-entry doing Mach 25?
You're doing Mach 25. It's actually 17,500 miles an hour on most flights. You start your re-entry halfway around the world from where you want to land. So today, landing at the Kennedy Space Center, they actually had turned themselves around backwards and upside down and actually probably executed the deorbit burn over the island of Madagascar off the east coast of Africa.
We're watching what was the liftoff of Columbia on the 16th of January, and I believe that we do have some video, I don't know if it's in this particular tape, where we can see the insulation that was on the external fuel tank as it peeled off, and they believe that it struck that left wing. And of course, they're saying that it was the sensors on the left wing that stopped transmitting data. They lost the telemetry on that. Does that tell you anything?
It really doesn't tell me anything, and it probably gives us an idea of where we need to go to start the analysis of what probably happened. We have lost, it's called thermal protection system. The orange tank, its orange color is because it's a foam. Its trade name is SOFI, spray-on foam insulation, and this is actually, it's sort of like cork. And it will get, sometimes it will accumulate ice on it. We don't like that, so generally we will hold up a launch to get all the ice off. But in some cases, pieces of the tank may pop off. They call it popcorning sometimes, or it may actually just have a chunk that falls off. And as I understand it, that's what happened on the launch of the vehicle this time, and it struck the underside of the left wing, or the leading edge.
It just kind of came back like that.
Just came back, and I'm not sure where it came out on here. I was listening to many of the press conferences also. The loss of data from the sensors on the left wing, I have to caution everybody. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where the problem was. That's where the problem was. It could have been, a break in a line. It could have been a number of things. But the coincidence of the tile coming off on that side, striking the left wing, loss of data there just before the accident, means that we really need to take a pretty strong look at that particular part of the vehicle. What you don't want to do, and what we had to force ourselves to do in the case of Challenger, was you don't want to stop when you think you know what happened. You really want to go through with everything. You'll look at all the data from this flight, you'll look at all the data from recent flights, and you may even go all the way back to the very beginning of the shuttle program to find out, okay, what happened that was similar to this? Did we ever lose data on a wing before? Did we ever get a tire pressure indication like we did this time? And I know we have. So, NASA is a very, very professional organization with some really high-powered, dedicated young men and women in it. And so it will take them some time. Probably, my guess is they'll have a good feel for what happened in a matter of days. It will probably take months to know for certain if that was the only thing that happened, and to get to the root cause of the accident.
Well, there's just so much information that's coming in. We were getting so many eyewitness accounts today talking about not just one explosion, but a series of explosions, about seeing trails of flame and fire and light in distinct different periods across different areas of the continental United States.
What we have to understand there is, I can't take the vehicle off, but as the vehicle is flying its reentry trajectory, it's a glider. So it's flying a plane trajectory that's not going to vary unless some outside force acts upon it. When you lose a piece of a wing, if that's what happened, when the first debris starts coming off the orbiter, it means that pieces of it are coming from somewhere. If you lose a part of the wing and it's sufficient to cause it aerodynamically to start wobbling or doing something like this, it does exactly what happened to the Challenger vehicle. It will get what we call out of the slipstream. Ordinarily, it would be flying, just coming down like this. If it starts to lose lift on one of the wings and it starts to wobble around, it'll get worse and worse. And then, because they were at the area of what we call highest dynamic pressure during the reentry, the aerodynamic forces, the physical force on the vehicle was maximum at the time of the accident. If it just gets turned a little bit, it'll break the wing off, it'll break the crew compartment off, and that's exactly, so destruction-wise, the mechanism of the vehicle coming apart, we probably will find was very similar to Challenger. Totally different circumstance, but this is a glider, and it's a very gentle vehicle. It's a 3G vehicle. In other words, it was built to withstand 3 times the force of gravity. It's not like an F-16, that can sustain 9, 10, 11 Gs. 3 Gs is all we want to see on this thing. And when it starts getting thrown around out of the slipstream, then it starts to break up, and that's probably what happened today. And so then you have pieces of debris. You've got to remember, it's traveling pretty fast. Yes. It's going a little bit less than a mile a second. And so as a piece falls off, it may fall off in Amarillo, the next piece may hit in Dallas, the next piece may hit in Shreveport, Louisiana. But I think when all is said and done, you'll find that all of the debris is along a very defined straight line that goes along the ground trajectory that was predicted for this flight.
They told us that after losing the telemetry from the heat sensors, then they lost telemetry from the air pressure sensor in the main left main gear. How far back of the wing? Can you give us an indication of how far back that is?
Right under the wing here, if you can. You won't see it on this, but close to the fuselage, but out a little ways on the wing is where the main gear well is. There's one on the left-hand side, one on the right-hand side, and then right under the nose where you can see this little strut is where the nose gear well is. Those have doors at about 400 feet, a little bit more than 10 seconds before landing. We actually send a signal that allows hydraulic pressure to come off the uplocks and just allows the doors to swing open by gravity. We don't push them or anything. They fall open by gravity. The gear falls down and it's locked into place and held there by hydraulic pressure. So it sounded as if the loss of data was starting to migrate from outboard on the wing to further inward. And if in fact the wing was coming apart, then that would go along with that. You know, gradually we're shedding pieces of the orbiter, losing data.
After Challenger, there was a lot of talk about escape hatches, escape ways of getting out. At that critical point, there was no way.
It would have, you mean for this crew today?
This crew.
God works in mysterious ways, and if he had decided today that there was going to be a miracle for this crew, and the crew module had stayed intact, because you have to remember, it is sort of a little cocoon. It's the only pressurized part of the orbiter, and it actually sits in it's a bubble that sits inside the nose section of the orbiter. If it had been their day, and the crew module had broken off smoothly, as it did in the case of Challenger, and it had been able to go through a couple of swings and right itself, theoretically, they would have had a chance to get out. But I have never been a believer in that, even after Challenger. When we decided that we were going to go to the launch and entry suits and the slide pole and all that, I mean, you're asking for a miracle to be able to do all that stuff. So, I don't think anybody in the crew seriously believed that would be available to them. I never did.
When you're sitting in the cockpit, can you look out that window and see the wing?
When you're sitting in, you can't, from being strapped in the way that the two crew members who could possibly have seen it were the pilot and the commander. And when you're strapped into your seat, as I remember, you can't get your head around far enough. If you can't
physically see the leading edge of that wing.
You can't physically see.
So if it was coming apart back there behind them, they would not know. They would know.
You're wearing a launch and entry suit with a helmet, and the helmet confines your movements. You can move a little bit, but you got to remember, the one thing you don't want to do during reentry as a pilot is move your head around, because now you'll cause your gyros to tumble. And generally the crew looks straight ahead. We have a heads-up display, a HUD, through which they can read data, and they really try to keep their head movements to a minimum. So
they were dealing with data.
Even if they had wanted to look, the discipline of training would have made them continue to look forward and rely on the ground crew to figure out if there was something wrong.
And they had an incredibly successful mission.
Unbelievable.
Yes,
unbelievable.
True.
Yeah.
Charlie, thank you. We've been talking with Charles Bolden, a member of the astronaut corps up until just a few years ago, who is now retired, lives in the Houston area.
Don't
Charlie,
go away,
stay with us. Yes,
if you
please, don't go away. We'd like to talk with you a little bit more. You're watching continuing coverage of the Columbia tragedy, and we'll be back with more in a few moments. Earlier today, the President of the United States came back from Camp David to the White House to issue a statement to talk about this tragedy. It's not too long. It's not a very long statement, but we would like for you to hear that now in case you had missed it before. The President of the United States.
My fellow Americans, this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our space shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors. On board was a crew of 7. Colonel Rick Husband, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Anderson, Commander Laurel Clark, Captain David Brown, Commander William McCool, Dr. Kulpna Shavla, and Ilan Ramon, a colonel in the Israeli Air Force. These men and women assumed great risk in the service to all humanity. In an age when space flight has come to seem almost routine, it is easy to overlook the dangers of travel by rocket and the difficulties of navigating the fierce outer atmosphere of the Earth. These astronauts knew the dangers, and they faced them willingly, knowing they had a high and noble purpose in life. Because of their courage and daring and idealism, we will miss them all the more. All Americans today are thinking as well of the families of these men and women who have been given this sudden shock and grief. You're not alone. Our entire nation grieves with you. And those you loved will always have the respect and gratitude of this country. The cause in which they died will continue. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on. In the skies today, we saw destruction and tragedy. Yet farther than we can see, there is comfort and hope. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry hosts one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. The same Creator who names the stars also knows the names of the 7 souls we mourn today. The crew of the Shuttle Columbia did not return safely to Earth, yet we can pray that all are safely home. May God bless the grieving families, and may God continue to bless America.
President Bush, some 3.5 hours ago, extending his condolences and his sympathies to the families who have just been brought back to the Houston area. About an hour ago from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, they arrived at Ellington Field here in Houston, obviously surrounded by NASA personnel, and they will go to their homes and remain in seclusion until NASA officials can tell them any more than they know right now about this Columbia tragedy today.
That's right. Our very own Tom Abrams is standing by in Clear Lake, a community that is very tight-knit and has been affected very much, right, Tom?
That's right, and you know, we heard the president speak obviously from his faith. He is a devout Christian, spoke heavily about God and about everlasting life. Once he prayed for these astronauts end up in heaven, and that faith was very much prevalent in the lives of at least 2 of those astronauts, both Mike Anderson and Rick Husband. Both of them attended a church service here at Grace Community Church on January 5th, just before their flight into space. And when they were at that church service talking about what it is they were planning on doing when they were up in space, Mike Anderson issued a statement that today seems at the very least ironic. Apparently our producer is telling us we don't have the tape, but I can tell you what Mr. Anderson said in the presence of his family and friends. He spoke about knowing that what he was doing was fraught with danger and with potential complications, but that they knew that going in, and that both he and his co-astronaut, Rick Husband, felt as though there was some sense of destiny, that they were on this flight together, that they knew what they were doing, and that everything would be okay. Of course, that is one of those churches, Grace Community, where there have been so many memorial services there today, where people have been coming and going and sharing their thoughts with one another, and we'll have more on all of that later today on Eyewitness News. Reporting live for now, Tom Abrams, 13 Eyewitness News.
All right, thanks, Tom. And back here in the studios, Tom Cook and Stephanie Guadian replacing Dave and Shara, and we'll be bringing them back for the 6 o'clock newscast tonight. We want to talk more now with Charlie Bolden. He is a former astronaut, former fighter pilot in Vietnam, and was with the astronaut corps until 1996, you said? 94. 94, excuse me. Let me ask you, back to the Challenger disaster. What happens now after a tragedy like this? What's the rebuilding process like for a huge agency like NASA?
The process has already begun. If you had an opportunity to see Milt Heflin and Ron Dittemore in their press conference, realizing that, you know, it was a bad day, first of all, but everybody has bad days, and that we are all dedicated to the exploration of space, particularly human exploration, and that it is worth the risk, as I think you've heard every crew say. So beginning right after the accident occurred and proceeding through until we fly the next flight, you get everybody focused on, one, determining what really was the root cause of the accident. Is there something we can do to fix it? If there's not a repair that can be done, then what measures do you put into place that will keep you from having a similar accident again in the future? And then you go fly again, and you pray.
Yeah. What's the most important task at hand right now?
I think gathering all the data, as Ron Dittemore said, not jumping to conclusions, allowing yourself to ask questions, the tough questions, and not second guess yourself. There will be a lot of people who will sit around tonight and tomorrow blaming themselves we've got to get over that and just go and look at the data and see what the data tells us and then try to put it all together. But it will be a very, as you could tell, it will be a very painful time.
It is.
The people at NASA have an unusual responsibility in that they have got to allow themselves to mourn, but keep working through this, because you can't take you can't take a break. You know, they'll be working on this probably 24 hours a day until they know what happened.
Can I equate this to your former service in Vietnam? Let me ask you if it's something similar, in that you flew more than 100 missions in Vietnam, you lost cohorts there, but you knew there was a sense of mission that despite your tragic loss, you had to go on. There was a mission there. Is that the same way it is with the NASA family?
Probably even more so with NASA. In combat, you do it because you're young and crazy, and you just think it's the right thing to do. And even if you don't think it's the right thing to do, it's your job. It's not like that in NASA among the astronauts. They really believe in what they're doing, and they really believe in the value of exploration, human exploration. And every single one of the thousands of contractors and NASA personnel who work with them feel that same way. I can tell you, people are hurting at Kennedy, they're hurting at Edwards, they're hurting at JSC, at NASA headquarters. Anybody who wears a NASA badge or a Boeing badge or a USA badge is hurting right now, because they all feel somewhat responsible. They make a big deal of that.
Let me go back to just one more quick question, and that is, when you were talking about the landing before and the descent, does the crew at all in that tiny compartment feel the heat on re-entry?
Oh, no. You have no idea. You do know that it's hot, and you have the visual image before you. As I said before, it's like being inside a light bulb. When you go through the period of time that they were experiencing, they were probably getting ready to come out of the glow, as I call it. The vehicle really heats up, and but you're in a launch and entry suit, big, heavy, 85-pound suit. You cool the vehicle down, so it's probably 72 to 74 degrees inside, and you're very comfortable, other than the fact that now you're starting to feel heavy. So temperature is not something that bothers the crew at a time like that. Their big concern then was just trying to adjust all this weight that they're starting to feel come back on. But they don't, other than visually, they have no idea how hot it really is out there.
And you're saying their visual perspective is just from here, but they keep their heads...
That's exactly right. They're looking... In fact, there are only 4 people in the vehicle of the 7 who can actually see anything, and they are the 4 that are on the flight deck. The commander sits on the left side, pilot on the right side. Mission specialist number 2, or the person that we kind of call the flight engineer, sits sort of back from them in the middle, and then mission specialist number 1 right behind the pilot.
And what do they see?
They're looking out, and they see the sky. The 2 pilots can actually see the ground out. I can remember on my last flight, we did what's called a descending orbit, so we came down toward the equator to the Kennedy Space Center. And from overhead Canada, we could actually see the Florida Peninsula. You know, 200,000 feet is pretty high.
It is.
And it's pretty spectacular. So while they are very professional in what they're doing, you can't help but allow yourself to take a moment to look out the window and go, holy gee. You know, to just marvel by the creation that's out there. So my guess is they were admiring, hopefully, they were having an opportunity to admire the view, especially the ones that were flying for the first time. So that you mix business with pleasure.
We talked about earlier, this is the first time that an accident like this has happened on a descent. Why would it be more prone to happen during takeoff?
You are more prone to have an accident on ascent because it is a much more dynamic time during the flight. Things happen very quickly. If you stop and think about it, you're talking about 8.5 minutes compared to an hour. The re-entry is very deliberate, very slow, although things happen quickly, but there are not very many things that can happen that you need to respond to like right now. You lose an engine on ascent. You have a matter of seconds to make a determination as to what you do. Do you abort or do you keep going? And so you've got people on the ground trying to decide, people in the cockpit trying to decide. You lose something in re-entry, you have time to think about it and talk about it and make sure that you're making the right decision. And generally in re-entry, the action is none. You don't do anything. On ascent, you usually have to do something, and it is a much more violent environment. Because the shuttle is going through, as it ascends, the wind direction, for example, is continuously changing. Your weatherman can tell you. And the vehicle's trying to be ripped apart just by the wind. And what we do is we preload the predicted winds so that the computers can move the control systems all around in anticipation of what it's going to see. So while it looks pretty smooth to us, and it feels It's rough. And the vehicle's really just shaking all over the place going up, trying to adjust to the wind. So it's much more likely to have an accident during the ascent phase because of the different things to which the vehicle is exposed.
You talked earlier with Dave and Shara about if something was wrong with one of the wings, perhaps something had come off one of the wings, they would have gotten the information from ground. Are there indicators on the shuttle that would have told the astronauts that there was something going on? Or
there is nothing on board the orbiter, at least when I was flying, and there is no need. There are thousands of parameters that the ground crews need to know. They need to know it now so that they can do something a few days from now while you're on orbit. So we don't have access to all that data, nor do we need it. The ground crews can tell you when you know, a nitrogen tank is leaking days before it's even going to be indicated to the crew. Really, the instrumentation that we lost during the reentry was not for this flight. It was for what we call the turnaround. Mm-hmm. It was instrumentation that would tell us the condition of the vehicle at the end of this flight, so we'd know, okay, we need to go to the left wing, and we may have lost a little bit more tile there than we want to lose. So it wasn't to do something. It's instrumentation that gives us information of turnaround activity that we need to do.
Okay. Let me go back to the question of support just for you and the rest of the NASA family. We saw the indications of community support outside the JSC today, the balloons that were initially put up and then the people putting flowers and things around. What does that say to people at NASA?
It lets us know, or it lets them know that people do care and that they aren't forgotten, that people, you know, still think about the space program. I get emotional, but I was thinking this morning about a saying that I use a lot, that's God and the soldier we adore, in times of trouble not before. The trouble over, all things righted, God's forgotten, the soldier slighted. And so people who fly these things tend to be forgotten when everything's going well. Right. And it's at times like this that it really helps us to know that people really do care.
Yeah.
We do.
And they are considered heroes,
yeah,
for sure.
My wife's home complaining right now because I'm getting all weepy.
Oh,
okay.
We're glad to have you here with us.
Major General Charles Bolden, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to go back out to the Johnson Space Center, and Deborah Wrigley is standing out there live now with the latest from there. Deborah?
If you take a look across the street, Tom, you can see how consistent the crowds here have been. People have been coming, going all day, walking through the picture. Some more people taking flowers over there. With us, we have the Oglesby family. Debbie Oglesby is, I guess, a subcontractor.
Yes.
Tell me about your morning. You went into work.
No, I got a call from a friend, and I called my program manager. I'm the deputy program manager, and the other folks in my office, none of whom were, of course, watching TV on a Saturday morning. So it was a shock to all of us, and it was just so reminiscent of Challenger all over again.
He said this is what you did during Challenger.
Yeah, it's exactly what we did. I didn't go in, but we did get people in to do the documentation, to secure all the documentation, the files for flight data file.
That was kind of a grim touch, too.
It is, and there were a lot of folks who just went into the office to sit because it's what we do when we don't know what else to do, just to be there. And it was tough. It's not going to be an easy time for us.
It took a long time recovering from Challenger.
It was, I think, 20 months or so of a stand down, and it's hard to keep the morale up. It's hard to keep people focused, but this is a tough bunch, and they'll do it.
Do you think there were lessons learned during Challenger, though?
Oh, definitely. The safety is number one with NASA. We have safety day every year. Everything we do, we open every meeting with a safety tip. It's just number one, and the risk just couldn't have been ascertained in any way, or it would have been. So
but
I feel confident about that.
Right. But lessons learned, it's kind of like the morale was down for a while. The momentum picked up. Maybe that goes to show that things recover.
They do. And like I say, this is a tough bunch, and there's no one here that doesn't, every time the shuttle launches, we all sit and we watch it and we wait until we're beyond the time when Challenger exploded.
Right.
And that's when we cheer. So we'll cheer again.
Yeah, I was at one of those. It was the next launch after that. Everybody held their breath.
Yes, we do.
And now it's going to be when they re-enter.
Yeah, this is the first time they've had any problem like that, though, so I'm sure they'll figure it out, and we'll go on.
It's such a tight community. It's somewhat of a cliquish industry.
It is.
Down here, and I guess that makes you feel all the more connected.
It does. It's everyone, we talk about it being, you know, government, and it's so different from private industry, and there are so many things that we deal with, right. and budget is one of them. And hopefully we will get some attention to space exploration, because it hasn't been that way.
And there have been budget cuts involving NASA. And in this community, there was so much concern about those. Will the program go on? Will the community continue to stay the way it is? Right. You think that will have the desired effect?
I do. I do. I think so. It's a tough bunch, like I said. You know, a lot of the old Department of Defense right stuffers are still here, and certainly their spirit lives on in everyone that works here. So
you brought your grandson here, and your husband.
Yes.
Why do you think it was important to bring him?
Because he is the future, and I want for him what we had for our children. You know, we had really the experience of, they grew up here at NASA, and every time the shuttle launched, we make a big deal out of it, and every time they land, and we've taught them a lot about the research that is done, that maybe NASA hasn't done a good job with PR, but certainly within the community we all know the benefits that the whole world reaps from the program.
You felt it was important, though. I've been asking people to be here. Why?
I guess it's how we grieve, so we can go on. We go together and grieve together and go on together.
Did you get some comfort from being with people who shared those thoughts?
Definitely, yeah. Definitely. And he put 7 roses over there, so we'll tell him about it as he grows and teach him.
Ms. Oglesby, thank you so much. Those are the kind of families that are coming over here. Just rows and rows of tributes. There was a little boy, a little red-headed boy, much like Jacob there, and he walked over with his little freckles. He held a wreath, and in it he had the pictures of the astronauts. He had a picture of Krista McAuliffe. He had a picture of the Israeli astronaut. Underneath it, there was a sign that said, "We lost another teacher." That's what a lot of people here feel. Back to you.
All right, Deb Wrigley, thanks. And you're watching live continuing coverage of the Columbia tragedy. We've been going all day long here ever since the tragedy first occurred shortly after 8 o'clock this morning, and we will continue to stay with you well into the evening hours. Let's take you live back to East Texas. I think we have Maya Shea.
That's right, we do. As the morning just begins, the cleanup and the investigation continues. Maya?
Well, we have been through the area of East Texas all afternoon looking to see what kind of debris people are finding. Let's set the scene for you one more time. We're here at the bank parking lot. You can see right around this area lots of people out here all day long looking at the scene. There's a large piece of debris right in front of the green trash can right over there that has been much of the target of a lot of people coming by here watching today. We have seen a lot of debris in the area throughout the county, hundreds and hundreds of pieces, people finding them in a church parking lot, for example. We saw a piece of curved metal. In another place, we saw a group of college kids, the house they lived in, they found out in their parking lot, well, pieces of tile that fell from the space shuttle. And then we saw pieces of debris along the side of the highway at the local airport and in front of people's homes. This is not the scene people expected to see in this sleepy little town on a Saturday morning, and yet when they go out their front doors, go out about their business, so many of them are finding something they never expected, and a lot of them are driving around town. You can see some of them here brought around flowers as part of a makeshift memorial that is developing here in the city of Nacogdoches. A lot of other people are taking their kids, their cameras, their camcorders throughout the area, taking pictures, talking, a lot of them in shock, a lot of them in disbelief that something so tragic happened and that this small town is playing such an integral part of this. And many of them saying that they want their kids to see this, they're taking pictures because they believe they are witnessing part of history. We've seen a lot of debris in the area. We are working on bringing some of that video to you. As soon as we have that, you will see that on Eyewitness News. For now, we're live in Nacogdoches. Maya Shea, 13 Eyewitness News.
Maya, earlier this afternoon when we talked to Jessica Willey, the crowds were sizable, and they still look to be sizable behind you. It doesn't look as though people are going home, does it?
No, people aren't going home because a lot of people are looking for answers here. And it seems like this being literally the town square, this is where they can, if not find answers, at least talk to their friends, people they know, talk to police officers who are around here to kind of talk about what they've seen, what they've noticed around town, and also to find comfort with each other. We should also mention that about 100 to 150 members of the National Guard based in Douglas and Natchitoches are out and about, and they have two jobs. One is what you've seen, some of the scenes going on behind me, that is keeping track of the debris they've seen. Another is also they're combing some of the rural areas for debris that other people have missed. Outside of this town, it is a very rural area. You don't see a lot of traffic, a lot of ranch land, so a lot of land that people don't go to on a daily basis. So the National Guardsmen are out there combing those fields, looking for any debris that people have missed, any crucial evidence that will be important as the investigation of this disaster goes on.
All right, Maya Shea live in Natchitoches. Thanks, Maya.
Well, as she said, this is history still unfolding, a very painful one. We just have video into the newsroom here now of members of the astronauts' families arriving in Ellington.
At Ellington Field this afternoon, being brought back from the Kennedy Space Center earlier today. The families, of course, were hustled away, if you will, from the flight line at Kennedy as they waited for the shuttle to land, and as soon as they knew there was a tragedy that had occurred, the family members were taken away by NASA. As you were told earlier today, President Bush called and talked to most of the family members earlier in the morning, and then the president went on TV to give them his condolences and sympathy. Then they were put on planes, or a plane, in Florida, and brought back here to Ellington Field about an hour ago, and there is the line of vans bringing the family members back here to Houston area.
If we could bring in Charlie Bolden one more time, former astronaut. I just wanted to ask you, it's very routine the family members would be there, yes, waiting and watching.
Usually the immediate family, the wives and or husbands and the children will have an opportunity to go down and either stand or sit alongside the runway to watch the orbiter land, and then they'll be taken over to what we call the astronaut crew quarters to wait for the crew members to get there and clean up, and then they can greet them and everything. And then they usually will fly back home together.
You know, the family members face this intense, I don't want to say media pressure, but everybody wanted to talk to them. And after Challenger, of course, the media tried to keep their distance, and I think it was Sean O'Keefe, the NASA administrator, said today, we hope that the media gives the families their privacy and their distance. But there is still, in the waning months now, the pressure to, grant an interview, to talk at funeral services and things like that. So there's that added pressure upon losing the death of a loved one.
There is always that, and much like we do in the military, NASA will assign a casualty assistance officer to each family, someone in the astronaut office who will be able to be the interface between the family and the media or anybody else. And at the particular time that a family member feels comfortable in addressing the media, they can do that. If they don't ever have to. And generally, most of them in time decide that they want to say something sort of in tribute to the family member that's lost. But
right. I mean, people from the Challenger disaster that became household names in this country.
Exactly.
Family members.
And as a result, good things come out of this. And I'm certain, just as with Challenger, which brought about the birth of the Challenger Learning Centers across the country, something good will come out of this. And as you heard earlier, when the kid talked about, we lost another teacher, something good will come out of this. And hopefully, what I hope at this particular stage of the game for us internationally is you look at the crew, the makeup of the crew, just as with the Challenger crew. It was an international crew, a multiracial crew, a mixed religion crew. There's a lesson there.
Okay.
Yeah. One family member is speaking out. If I read this, the mother of Space Shuttle Columbia's pilot says she's very distressed but doesn't want her son to have died in vain. Audrey McCool says space flight must continue despite the accident. This was William McCool's first space flight. Was this a very experienced crew?
It was a very inexperienced crew from the standpoint of having flown in space, as I understand it, and I did not, unfortunately, I didn't know any of them personally.
I was just going to ask you that. You didn't.
But I understand 4 of them, this was their first flight. The commander was on his second flight.
Right.
And so from the standpoint of this day and age, the program being as mature as it is, it was a relatively young crew,
right,
relatively inexperienced crew. But I'll tell you, when you go through the training that is provided prior to flying, other than just having had the experience, you have seen and experienced everything, and they were ready to do their jobs, as they proved over the last 16 days. An amazingly successful flight.
Charlie, stand by for a few minutes. We're going to turn to Bob Dogum, the FBI agent from here in Houston, to talk to him about the legality of the debris. We have seen actually on eBay today at least 3 postings of people offering debris from Columbia for sale. And Bob Dogum, I don't know if you can answer that question about whether that's illegal or not. eBay pulled those auctions immediately, but just the handling of the debris, what can you tell us?
Well, first of all, I think as everyone's already been advised, that there is a potential danger for even handling the debris. In addition, though, of course, you could conceivably have a case of a theft of government property, because again, that aircraft or that vehicle is U.S. government property, and also if anyone knowingly or conceals or withholds parts of a civil aircraft that has been involved in an accident is a federal offense.
Bob, let me ask you about the FBI's involvement in the investigation. Earlier today, I think a NASA person said that the FBI would be involved only tangentially because they didn't think it was terrorism or terrorists were involved. But we see a lot of FBI agents up in East Texas now. What will be their role?
Well, you're absolutely right. Where there has it has been determined that there has not been any kind of a terrorist act, but we didn't know that initially. So certainly, first thing this morning, we had here in the Houston office stood up our command post within an hour of knowing of the accident, of being made aware of the accident. Since there is no criminal nexus, we will continue to provide any kind of support that we can to NASA or any of the other federal agencies that are involved in this investigation. Principally, what we could deploy are some folks from our evidence recovery team.
And is that what they're doing now in East Texas?
You know, I couldn't speak to exactly what the Dallas division or our agents in that area are doing. I can tell you in general that certainly would be one of the resources that we could provide.
Okay. All right, Bob Dogum, the FBI agent here in Houston. Thanks, Bob. We appreciate the information. You're looking right now, that was a part from an RCS system. It's a reaction control system, Charlie, is what I've learned earlier today. That is one of the fuel cells. Am I right? That's what we're told?
It looks like a propellant tank.
It is.
How big is that?
That's pretty big. It's about, my guess is, depending on which one it is, it's probably 14, 15 inches in diameter.
Okay. I actually have the diagrams here of the reaction control system, and you're absolutely right. That's one of the fuel cells that powered the RCS. So many acronyms in NASA, RCS and ETA and everything else.
Yep.
Well, we have numerous crews out right now covering this tragedy. Art Rascone joins us live now. Art?
Yes, hello, Stephanie. Hello, Tom from San Augustine County. Clear out here in East Texas. This has been a county that has been tremendously involved in the cleanup effort or rescue effort of the debris, at least. We're trying to gather the debris. We have the trucks here who have been out here all day. All of these individuals, they have various teams that have been literally scouring the area. And whenever a report of debris comes in, then of course they get out there and try and cordon off the area and secure the area. County Judge Wayne Holt, he's been sort of supervising this area. It's been tough, isn't it? Tough day.
It's been real tough. It's been a loss for the whole nation.
And personally, how difficult has it been for you in dealing and trying to supervise this effort in the county?
Well, we've had the FBI here doing most of the supervision. I've been doing everything I can to help from, you know, if I have to talk with anyone, I try to just give them some help on the thing. The hurt goes deep with all of us, I believe, on this. When you lose 7 people like we did in this crash, it's not just a local thing here. This is a national thing, and it's a tragedy that it hurts pretty deep. You know, our country is hurting right now anyway, and when we have something like this, it even hurts worse.
Judge, I noticed that the workers, of course, have been trying to fan out, and they're breaking up into groups, and I assume they're out there with ATVs even. I noticed them. Are they trying to grid this entire county and search for things?
Well, I'm not at liberty to say exactly what they're trying to do. I can't divulge in that.
Okay. But there is an effort to at least try and get some of that debris, and I suppose cordon and secure it, right?
Of course. There is an effort to do that, but like I say, I'm not at liberty to say we're trying to keep this just as low-key as we can.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Judge. Appreciate your help. So the effort continues, and it will continue, of course, all night and well into tomorrow and the coming days as well. There have been probably about 100 people out here most of the time at this command post. The workers continue to come and go. They're feeding folks out here as well. They have the rescue units out here. They have EMS out here. They have the hazmat crews out here. Just a whole host of agencies, and from various local as well as statewide agencies, local fire departments, volunteer fire departments, the paid department as well. So soon as well, we understand that the FBI, who is actually supervising this entire command post, they will be briefing us here in the next 15 minutes, we're told. They're trying to gather the information, what they can talk about from NASA in Houston as well as Florida, and as well getting the word what they can say from Washington. So we should have an FBI spokesman out here soon within the next 15 minutes, and of course we'll bring it to you live. Live in San Augustine County, Art Rascon, 13 Eyewitness News.
All right, thanks, Art. Well, we have Kevin Pursglove from eBay on the phone with us. As we just mentioned, there were 3 listings that I saw, Mr. Pursglove, on the phone on the internet this afternoon from eBay. I'm sure much to eBay's dismay.
You're probably accurate in terms of the number of items that you saw, and then our goal, of course, is to remove those items as fast as they get up.
And I think they were they not?
Yeah, I think we've been able to remove them probably within a time frame of, say, 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes.
I know it's shocking when people say there's an item listed on eBay such as apart from the shuttle that just exploded. So what are eBay's rules concerning things like this? I mean, we've seen so many things listed on eBay. A family offered themselves for sale, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks or so ago. We actually have a number of our customer support team, which is located in Salt Lake City, that are monitoring the site 24 hours a day. And they're looking at the site from the viewpoint of a customer, making sure the site is operating correctly, making sure the features are performing properly. But they're also looking for certain types of items. And that can range anything from an illegal item to many of the questionable or non-allowed items that we will not permit on eBay. So the minute a tragedy of this nature begins, we have supervisorial personnel who are there. They begin immediately putting together a list of possible ways in which an item may be described or listed, and then they begin looking for those items and removing them as soon as possible.
Okay, one more question for you. I know it's hard to believe that someone would actually try to sell something like this on eBay, but I'm curious how the public reacted.
So far, I think what we've seen on our board is more talking about the event itself. We have seen some people who have applauded us for the fast removal of the items. There have been 1 or 2 comments on our board, so people think that we're interfering with the right of people to sell merchandise. But I think more than anything else right now, the discussions that we're seeing on our boards is more about the tragedy itself rather than those individual items that may appear on eBay.
Yeah, in fact, Kevin, earlier today, the listing that offered a piece of the shuttle said, I was out jogging outside my home in Nacogdoches and I found this, and I'm sure you'll want a piece of history. People might not even realize that it's government property, and selling it could be theft of government property, right?
You're right. But I think there's 2 things to remember here. Number 1 is the fact that you may see people who are listing an item and it's a prank. As a matter of fact, some of the first listings that we saw on the site today were from people who were nowhere near Texas. So the possibility of them having a piece of the shuttle debris is highly unlikely. The second is you might see somebody who is attempting to simply defraud somebody, putting an item on the site, and they don't have the item in question, and they're nowhere near it. So you see probably both of those situations. And then the third might even be the fact that people are simply listing the item as a prank. A sick prank, perhaps, but you see that as well.
Okay. Kevin Pursglove with eBay, thank you very much. It is the world's greatest marketplace as it's become to be known, but people have sold almost anything in the last couple of years on eBay, or tried to sell, and I know, as he just said, they've got a lot of rules concerning what they'll list and what they won't list, and that certainly is one of them.
But I have to say that I think the majority of the reports that have come in are of people actually trying to help, taking it upon themselves to try and secure an area until officials can get there.
Right. So, and Charlie Bolden, I saw your eyes when I had mentioned that 3 items are listed on eBay, and that's, I mean, just above and beyond shocking sometimes.
Different. Very much so. Very much so.
What have you thought, what has gone through your mind throughout the day as to, what the NASA community, how they try and pull back together in the very near future?
I think there are enough people who are left over from the days of the Challenger accident and the Apollo fire that will help the younger kids understand that now is a time to come together to provide support